Going to be a recorded space. I'm going to make it quick and snappy. I just had an idea. I think it's pretty cool. It's just a new way to think about Caspa. This is a space I'm not going to let anyone join. I'm just going to speak for 6 seconds, maybe 6 minutes. Just a new way to think about Caspa. So I'm doing a thought experiment, and I am comparing Caspa to FANG startups. And what I mean by that is, what do I qualify as a FANG startup, and why does this matter? A FANG startup in my book would be X, or an X alternative. Facebook, Instagram, right? Or Google Drive, OneDrive, Dropbox, right? That's like another startup. Telegram, Discord, right? These are all, I would argue, Silicon Valley ideas that are like startups, right? Um, and why does this matter? Well, if if I were an institutional like investor and you had an app or a business idea that you wanted to run by me and you said, I'm making a new alternative to X and it's better than X because of A, B, and C, right? I'm making an alternative to Twitter and it's better because of A, B, and C, right? Um, I would give you money as an investor, and that money that I give you has a runway, um, or at least a clock ticking on it. So if I give you money to do that startup, there is a ticking time bomb before you need to have that business be adopted and generate money so that way I can be paid back as an investor, but also so your business is sustaining itself on its own. So as an investor, or I guess there's or I guess on a protocol level, if you're the person developing this software and you're looking for investor money, you have like a 2-year clock. You're probably only given a year to 2 years of operating expenses, and then you either have to raise new money or you die. And so I'm going to be comparing that aspect to Caspa and why this is such a genius value proposition. So here's my mindset. Right now on Caspa, there is a Telegram alternative that is more sovereign. That's Kasai messaging. There is essentially a Discord-like feature alternative at the moment on Kasai messaging, right? So if there's value there, it's like broadcasting to a group chat in a way. That's Discord, and then the broadcast feature on Kasai messaging. There's also file storage you can upload that's cheaper and more um, like it's less risky in the sense that you get permanent file storage for cheaper. You just pay a one-time fee. Um, on Caspa, there's a protocol that lets you do that sovereignly. It uses all the archival nodes. So that's a brilliant value proposition. So right now, what I'm painting a picture of is I'm painting what are the use cases right now for Caspa. And these are the apps that currently exist. There's a few more. There's an X alternative. There's a developer like release. There's actually two X alternatives, but one of them is being launched by the developer, I think, in like a week or so. Um, and the value proposition on that is it's censorship resistant, and yeah, there should be uptime. Remember when X was down this week? AWS went down and X was down. Well, guess what? Caspa's never been down. So you're going to have less risk regarding the infrastructure and uptime, but you're also not going to be censored. So there's that element, and there's no less privacy, people breathing down your neck, right? So what am I doing right now? I am painting every single application that's currently built on Caspa. There are more to come. But let's think about it like this. Why am I saying all this? Why did I make a space to just talk about this? Well, imagine this. Imagine I'm an entrepreneur and I go to you. You have money. You're an investor. And I say, Mr. Investor, I want to develop the next X. I want to develop the next Discord. I want to develop 6 different FANG company software applications, right? That would require a lot of startup capital. That would require me hiring people or maybe using AI to build something. I would have to, there is startup capital to get my business up and running, and I need your money so I can fuel my business for 2 years, and we're banking on the fact that within those 2 years, it's gonna be profitable or it dies. And that's typically how software and protocols, or I guess software in this instance, applications, um, that's kind of how they're adopted. Well, what does this have to do with Caspa? I would argue that um, if we look at Caspa kind of like as an investment, by the way, this is not financial advice, but this is the way I'm looking at it. Who would I rather be? Would I rather be an institutional investor banking on one entrepreneur making six different apps, or six entrepreneurs making six apps? Would I want to bank on that and then fuel them for 2 years and hope that they generate a profit? Or with Caspa right now, there are developers building protocols. And if you think about it, their upfront cost is very cheap. They're usually a one-man operation. They're an indie developer with like 300 followers, and they build a protocol that is essentially an application alternative to a Fang alternative. They build it in their bedroom. Um, and the runway on this is smaller, or I guess is less risk in my opinion, than if we were to go the startup route to get this product to the market. So I guess what I'm trying to articulate is Caspa has a longer runway compared to the typical startup route because Caspa already is worth $1 billion in market cap. So essentially, this is a network that is worth $1 billion that people are building on. And I guess what I'm trying to say is $1 billion is able to support these new protocols that are being built every new month. Every new month, there's something new built on Caspa, and there's $1 billion behind it. Whereas for the applications I just mentioned, do you think I could raise $6 billion? Probably not. That's really hard to do, and the amount of capital I would be able to raise would be far, far, far less, and the runway is quicker. And so the reason I'm bringing all this up, I know it's kind of a tangent, but it's because of Caspa's security budget. A lot of people are worried that Caspa's security budget is something to worry about. There's a clock, right? The same way that Bitcoin's security budget kind of starts to become a real issue. I would argue next halving or in two halvings, right? Bitcoin has no way to make revenue and pay the miners. The price has to keep going up, otherwise things start to fall. And so far it's been fine, but anyway, that's another tangent. But that's the idea. And so my argument base case is that if you were to compare the runway of a startup, it dies before the runway of Caspa's security budget and the value proposition and the income that can be generated from the usage of these protocols. So I'm making a bet. I'm banking that the X alternative on Caspa, I'm banking that the Telegram alternative on Caspa, I'm banking that the Dropbox alternative on Caspa, I'm banking that these are going to need less of a runway and are going to get adoption. And I guess I'm trying to say is all of them generate fees for the same network. So the all of them benefit each other. Um, and so that will feed the miners. That will produce revenue for the network and making the network more valuable. And increasing that startup runway. And so all the purpose of the runway, I guess the better word is like a clock. The clock runs out when there's no adoption. Um, and that happens with startups, with money. If you have no adoption, the clock runs out. And I guess what I'm trying to say is because Caspa is proof of work and there's block rewards, maybe as a monetary network, it's scary that these block rewards are getting smaller and smaller. But it's actually still better than a startup. Caspa's block reward is fast for a proof of work network. That the halvings are fast, but the runway and the ticking clock that exists with Caspa, I would argue, is still longer than a startup. So if you wanted to launch an X alternative, you have a longer runway before you're out of business, before Caspa fails, than you would if you did it yourself with investor money. That is my opinion. Because in investor money, you might only get a year worth of runway before you run out of money. Whereas Caspa, your X alternative might not bring in any traffic, but the Telegram alternative might bring in traffic. And so you literally get a longer runway for adoption because of other protocols and applications built on the network. And so everything benefits each other. And for every new application built on Caspa, it decreases the risk of that runway drying up. Every new app on Caspa increases the runway of how much longer do we have to support with less adoption. So right now with no adoption, right? Let's be real. Caspa really doesn't have a whole lot of adoption. It's still very small, but it's in the building phase. My argument is that the building phase on Caspa is longer and has less risk than if you were to be an entrepreneur and have someone else fund your building phase. I'm arguing that proof of work, if you were to build your application on Caspa, you have a longer runway um, before you go out of business. And so I just think that's a very interesting dynamic. Um, so that's my 2 cents. I hope I made sense. I know I may have been a little scattered brain in sharing all this, but I think this is just an interesting value proposition. I'm just looking at it from the startup lens. Um, which one's quicker to death, right? An application that you invest in going the fiat venture capital route, which one dies faster, or what's going to die faster, the X alternative on Caspa, the Telegram alternative on Caspa. Does I would argue that that actually dies much longer if not adopted. That has longer runway. There's less risk with that. That can be alive. It's a cockroach. It's like the startup cockroach. It can last longer without being adopted because it's on a proof of work network and there's block subsidies. So yes, these block subsidies are decreasing. Yes, people aren't really using Caspa right now, um, and that's not a big deal because people are building apps. And I think as long as people start to adopt these apps, if there is demand for sovereignty outside of the ledger of money, if there is demand for sovereignty regarding data and privacy on those ledgers, I think Caspa has a brilliant value proposition. Um, so that's what I'm banking on. And the reason I'm sharing this too, I'm more scattered brain again, but I have to share this. Everything I just shared is the optimistic investing utility approach to Caspa, right? What is the new utility what is the value proposition as an investor, right? Um, what's the forward thinking value proposition of Caspa? Um, what is the future? How is it an innovation, right? So that's um, the lens that I'm looking at this through is the innovation lens. Most of my Twitter, though, however, what's really unique about Caspa is a lot of my time has been spent not so much describing the innovation of Caspa, but actually just how it's less risky than Bitcoin. There's two elements to Caspa, and I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going on a tangent now. This has nothing to do with the title of the call now. This is just something I thought of. But um, Caspa as a technology, what I just mentioned, is the innovative front, but there's also the de-risking front, right? Um, Forget all the cool utility value and applications on Caspa. There's actually still value proposition in Caspa if you could never build a D app, if you could never build a sovereignty protocol on top of it. There's actually still immense value proposition to Caspa without anything I just mentioned before. Those are all just cherries on top. That's being optimistic. The value proposition I see in Caspa is you can de-risk from Bitcoin. Never before have you been able to really de-risk from Bitcoin in a logical way that mitigates Bitcoin's unaddressed infrastructure risks, right? There's so many uh, Bitcoin features that are the whole point of Bitcoin is to de-risk from fiat and fractional reserve banking. Those are all infrastructure risks that have consequences to people that use it. And so Bitcoin was a great way to use a version of money that can't be fractionally reserved, and it has a bunch of new innovations. You get property rights with cold storage. Um, it's faster than wire transfers. It's permissionless, right? So there, there's all these benefits to Bitcoin. But what happens when you're all in on Bitcoin and you're 100% in on Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin has, it makes sense to de-risk from Bitcoin just from an investing point. But on top of that, as Bitcoin ages, it's just designed in such a way that as more people use it, more risk is introduced. And it shouldn't be designed that way. It should be designed in such a way that the more people that use it, the less risky it gets. And so that in and of itself is a massive value proposition. And so as Bitcoin gets more successful and more people on board, it gets more risky. Um, and there's got to be a way to de-risk without going back into fiat and without shorting Bitcoin. You don't want to short Bitcoin. That's not a way to de-risk. You're still back into fiat. So there needs to be a way to proof of work and also self-custody de-risk from Bitcoin, a complete redesign. Um, and so there's a conservative element to Caspa, which is the de-risk from Bitcoin. There's the conservative value proposition, which 100% stands alone in it by itself. Um, but there's also the innovation front of Caspa, um, of what's to come, the permissionless protocols, and how there's a longer startup capital runway with Caspa than if you were to go the venture capital route. That's just my 2 cents. That's my two Caspa. That's my two sats, whatever the hell you want to call it. Um, 2 sats on Bitcoin isn't really possible though because of the fucking transaction fees and shit. But anyways, um, thank you for listening. This was my schizo posting on just something I've been thinking about, a shower thought. And that's it. Feel free to play this back. This should help maybe your conviction in Caspa. Oh yeah, one more thing. None of this is financial advice. I'm an absolute moron, and all of this can completely not happen. There's still risk that just like any other startup, none of this happens and it all fucking falls through. So who knows, right? This is risky. So do your research. Don't be an idiot. Don't listen to an onion on the internet. And yeah, that's all. Peace. Thanks. Bye bye.